I wanted to ask you something. I feel kind of dumb.
I don't feel dumb. What's up?
Okay, please don't say anything, but I need your advice. I don't know. I don't think I'm a good kisser.
Just kiss me.
What?
Just kiss me. It's not gay if we're practicing for boys, I promise.
Oh my god. Casey and Pepper were totally making out. Apparently she's a lesbian.
I kiss girls and I'm not a lesbian.
What? So what's better, kissing girls or guys? Just tell me.
Hey,
You were the reason I was bullied last year.
you're the boyfriend stealer here.
I am not and never will be a boyfriend stealer. I'm a fucking lesbian.
What? You're gay.
Yes, I am.
I thought a lot about you today, about how you made me feel beautiful and safe.
This third story reframes the film's exploration of queer experience by confronting the emotional wreckage left behind when women are pitted against each other under patriarchal narratives of shame, sexuality, and credibility. And the confrontation between Zoe and Penny becomes less about resolving a single conflict and more about exposing the mechanisms through which queer women are erased, misread, and punished long before they are ever seen. The scene opens with accusation and disbelief, immediately situating the audience inside the raw afterlife of bullying, where harm lingers not only in memory but in identity, shaping how a person moves through the world and how safe they feel being known. Zoe's claim that Penny was responsible for the cruelty she endured last year grounds the story in a familiar truth for many queer women: that reputation, once damaged, becomes a weapon that others feel entitled to wield, often without evidence, and always without concern for the lasting impact. Penny's initial deflection and dismissiveness illustrate how easily cruelty is justified when it aligns with dominant narratives, particularly those that police women's sexuality, and her remark that Zoe had it coming echoes a cultural script that blames women for their own victimization, especially when they are perceived as sexually transgressive. What makes this exchange particularly resonant for LGBTQ+ audiences is how quickly the accusation centers around sexual rumor, with the word slut functioning as both a moral judgment and a silencing tool, stripping Zoe of complexity and reducing her to an object of scorn that can be safely attacked. The scene carefully unpacks how heterosexual assumptions fuel this cruelty, as Penny frames the conflict around male attention and presumed rivalry, unable at first to imagine that Zoe's life and desires might exist entirely outside that framework. This inability mirrors a broader societal discomfort with queer women's autonomy, where female desire is expected to orbit men, and when it does not, it is either erased or aggressively misinterpreted. Zoe's frustration builds not only from the injustice of being blamed, but from the exhaustion of constantly having to defend her reality against narratives that refuse to account for her truth, and when she finally names herself as a lesbian, the moment lands not as a triumphant reveal but as an act of self-preservation. A boundary drawn after harm has already been done. This is a crucial distinction, because the film resists framing coming out as a cure-all or a moral victory, instead showing it as something queer women are often forced into prematurely, not on their own terms, but in response to accusation or danger. Penny's stunned reaction underscores how invisibility operates alongside hypervisibility for queer women. Zoe was visible enough to be targeted, yet invisible enough that her actual identity was never considered. And this contradiction reflects a real-world pattern in which queer women are simultaneously scrutinized and misunderstood. As Zoe recounts the truth about the incident with Penny's boyfriend, the scene exposes how quickly women's testimonies are dismissed in favor of preserving male reputations, and how queer women are especially vulnerable to being framed as aggressors or temptresses in stories that center men's desire as uncontrollable and women's boundaries as negotiable. Zoe's insistence on setting the record straight is not just about clearing her name, it is about reclaiming her narrative from a system that had already decided who she was allowed to be. And her anger carries the weight of countless similar moments where queer women are forced to justify their existence in hostile spaces. Penny's gradual shift, from defensiveness to realization to remorse, illustrates another painful truth: that harm is often inflicted not by explicit hatred, but by ignorance coupled with entitlement, and that accountability requires more than apology. It requires a reckoning with the assumptions that made the harm possible. When Penny apologizes, the repetition of "I'm sorry" feels less performative than desperate, as though she is grasping for a way to undo damage that cannot be neatly repaired. And Zoe's acceptance of the apology is restrained, signaling not forgiveness as absolution, but as a pragmatic choice to release herself from carrying the weight of someone else's guilt. The quiet exchange that follows, where Penny acknowledges Zoe's sexuality and Zoe responds that it was never anyone's business, is one of the film's most emotionally resonant moments because it articulates a core tension in queer life. The desire to be known versus the right to privacy, and the exhaustion that comes from having that right repeatedly violated. This moment invites queer viewers to reflect on their own experiences of being outed, questioned, or forced to explain themselves, and it affirms that visibility should be chosen, not coerced by cruelty. Symbolically, Zoe represents the cost of misrepresentation, the scars left by being seen incorrectly, while Penny embodies the possibility of change that arises when women confront the harm they have absorbed and reproduced, even if that change arrives too late to prevent pain. Their interaction mirrors a broader cultural pattern in which women are encouraged to compete rather than empathize, to distrust rather than listen, and the film's decision to stage this conflict between two women rather than resolving it through male intervention underscores its commitment to centering women's emotional realities. For women watching, regardless of sexual orientation, the scene speaks to the universal fear of being misunderstood and publicly shamed, and the longing for a space where one's truth can be spoken without retaliation. For queer women in particular, it captures the layered vulnerability of existing at the intersection of misogyny and heteronormativity, where one's body and identity are constantly interpreted through hostile lenses. The film also challenges society's discomfort with women expressing love for each other by revealing how that discomfort often manifests indirectly, through rumor, policing, and the weaponization of respectability rather than overt condemnation. By showing how quickly suspicion and resentment arise around perceived sexual deviance, the story exposes the underlying anxiety that women's bonds might operate outside male control, and that such autonomy threatens entrenched power structures. The persistence of this discomfort today can be traced to the same roots, a cultural investment in defining women through male desire, and a fear of what happens when women refuse that definition. In allowing Zoe and Penny to confront each other without spectacle or simplification, the film insists on the complexity of women's relationships, acknowledging that harm and healing can coexist, and that accountability does not require villainizing one woman to redeem another. Ultimately, this third story reinforces the film's larger message that queer visibility is not just about romance or desire, but about truth-telling in the face of systems designed to obscure it, and that becoming visible often involves reclaiming one's narrative from those who have already decided it for you. By centering this confrontation within a queer, emotionally grounded framework, the film offers LGBTQ+ viewers recognition rather than fantasy, inviting them to see their own struggles reflected not as cautionary tales but as evidence of resilience. And it asks all viewers to consider the cost of believing rumors over people, labels over lived experience, and comfort over justice, reminding us that authenticity, once claimed, is not about spectacle but about survival and self-respect.